Well, for a little bit more conversation on the first day of school for inland-based pupils, we now speak to Commissioner André Gaum from the South African Human Rights Commission. He's responsible for rights to education. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter, and good evening to the viewers.
So it should be a great day for all our students across the country, but I suspect that you're concerned that it's not an equal playing field for all our pupils.
Yes, I think as far as both infrastructure in schools as well as quality of education is concerned, it is unfortunately not equal playing field. And then adding to that, into that equation, also the matter of rotational learning that is still taking place due to COVID-19, all of that really creates an unequal playing field. Now, if we only look at infrastructure, for example, I heard the minister also referring to that in particular. We have certain provinces with a huge problem in that regard, notably Gauteng and the Western Cape, and to a large extent KwaZulu-Natal as well, where the infrastructure budgets that's been provided is simply not enough to really be able to provide enough schools for learners, especially new learners also migrating from other provinces. For example, the Western Cape would say that they need 18 new schools to be built every year. But apart from all of that, as we all know very well, there are still huge inequalities between public schools as far as infrastructure is concerned. But the biggest problem is not that there are inequalities in that sense of the word, but that there are still many public schools without at least basic adequate infrastructure that meet the regulations relating to minimum uniform norms and standards for public school infrastructure that were prescribed by the Minister of Basic Education, Minister Moshega, on 29 November 2013. These regulations state that within 3 years from the publication of the regulations, that schools built of mud and metal and the like needs to be replaced and needs to be addressed. And this deadline has not met by far. The deadline for things like school libraries in all schools and laboratories for schools that offer science subjects is 29 November 2023, end of next year. Another deadline most probably under serious threat. The regulations further specifically state that the acceptable norms for class sizes is a maximum of 30 learners per grade R classroom and 40 learners in relation to other classes. We all know, unfortunately, that this requirement is not met at all across the board, with a resultant negative impact on the quality of education for poor and vulnerable learners. These very same regulations state emphatically that all schools must have sufficient water supply and that plain pit and bucket latrines are not allowed at schools. So the Commission is currently focusing on the pit and bucket latrine prohibition in the DBE's own regulations and the mandatory provision of sufficient water supply to all schools. Hence our announcement last year, towards the end of last year, of litigation against 5 provincial education departments in this regard. However, that is not where we will leave the matter of ensuring that the regulations are fully implemented, as in our view, it sets the very minimum norms and standards for the realization of the immediately realizable right to a basic education as far as infrastructure is concerned. Put differently, the non-implementation of the regulations is a violation of the right to a basic education and of the constitutional principle that the best interests of the child is paramount. So yes, there are still huge inequalities, but mainly the issue is that not even the minimum norms and standards are met, although we are aware that Minister Moshecha is taking strides to attempt to address these issues.
Commissioner, it's going to be 28 years this year since the founding of a democratic nation, and I just wonder why you think we are where we are 28 years later. Is it because there were insurmountable challenges, or has the government let our children down?
Well, I think on the one hand, we acknowledge that great strides have been made. On the other, I think inefficiencies and ineffectiveness in addressing these problems also played a major role. And it is simply unacceptable that this situation continues. And that is why, specifically in terms of the infrastructure norms and standards that has been published by the Minister herself, the Commission is now tightening the screws to make sure that these matters get the necessary attention, therefore also the litigation that we are embarking upon. The Minister disagreed with our own figures. These were provided by the education departments in these provinces themselves. She said it's not 3,000 schools with pit latrines, but more or less 1,000 schools. Well, 1,000 schools is still just simply not an acceptable situation at all after all these years, specifically given that the department is prohibiting pit latrines in schools in its regulations and has set, as far as the matter of sufficient water and sanitation is concerned, a deadline that expired long ago on the 29th of November 2016. So yes, we are not happy with the situation as it is at all. We cannot afford more children dying because of lack of proper sanitation and pit latrines and the like. But at the same time, we are still engaging the Minister in an endeavor to make sure that these things get addressed once and for all.
I was listening to the MEC for Education in Gauteng today, and he talked about one of the challenges that he faces every year is this influx of children coming into the province from other parts of the country. What does that tell us? Because it does suggest, I guess, that some provinces are better off than others.
Yes, I think that, it is a multi-layered issue. People might think they would get better opportunities in certain provinces, that the education system is better there, etc. But whatever the case may be, it is a matter that needs to be addressed, which means that there should be sufficient infrastructure budget being made available to the provinces mostly affected, especially Gauteng and the Western Cape. We have also from our side, because of problems last year of the very same nature in these two provinces, unfortunately we have these problems every year in these two provinces. We have engaged with National Treasury, the Treasury in these two provinces, the basic education departments in these provinces, to try and establish where exactly, and we're still continuing with that investigation, where exactly the issue is and where the problem lies. Is it an inadequate infrastructure budget coming from National Treasury coupled with the equitable share that is not sufficient? Is it a question of these two provinces in terms of prioritizing their own budgets, providing not enough funds to the basic education departments? Or is it because of unacceptable prioritization from these education departments? So it's actually a three-tier issue that we're looking into, because we really want to get to the bottom of this. And it should be addressed. And these two provinces, Gauteng and the Western Cape, are specifically affected, also KwaZulu-Natal. But, the migration issue has become a reality for many years now, and we simply cannot not address it. The government cannot not address it. They should tackle it head on.
Commissioner, we're going to have to leave it there, sadly, but thank you very, very much indeed for giving us some insights into some of the challenges that our schools and more particularly our pupils are facing as a result of these imbalances and inequalities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Peter. All best.